Hello everyone, Vanderbosch here. So today we'll be looking at the injection pump on the Delica. Last year when we were putting the van away, noticed a pretty good leak coming out of the engine side of the injection pump. So I won't be able to get at this seal with the injection pump installed. I have to remove it. So I went on YouTube, went on the threads, found some good links. I'll put them in the description for everything I used in doing this job. So we'll have to get the injection pump out so I can get the seal replaced. Hopefully not mess with any of the timings. So to do that, we have to take the fan shroud off, the upper timing cover. We'll have to take the fuel rail connections off, all the fuel connections to the pump itself, the throttle cable, and then there are two sets of mounts on the injection pump. One is that affects like the timing of the pump, and then one that's just for mounting the pump. So we'll have to take the one that's just for mounting off and keep the one that affects running put together so we don't mess with how the engine runs. The engine's been running great, so I don't want to mess with that. So we'll start off with taking the fan cover off and then move on to the following steps, and hopefully we can get this thing done and put back together and running again. Alright, so for the fan cover, it looks like there's just these clips around the edge that you just have to slide off like up or down to unhinge them. So there's one, there's one, there's one over there. It's probably one on the back. There's a clip right here, and then it looks like someone at some point added a bolt and a nut. I don't know if that's standard in most Delicas, but it looks like removing those things and then twisting this thing will let me get this thing out. So let's see if that works. Alright, so with that fan shroud out of the way, I think there's 5 bolts on the upper timing cover. They are 10 millimeter bolts on the timing cover. There's going to be one here, here, there, and then just on the other side over there. Even with this video, I'm still gonna probably mess it up because I think they're all different length bolts. So I drew some really shitty version of the upper timing cover and just put X's where the bolts should go, and I'm just gonna stab the bolts through this piece of paper so I know where they go back when I'm done. Before I take this off, there's one thing I'd like to note for future me is some of these bolts are also being used for brackets. So this one here, there's a bracket that ties to this line here. It looks like all of the brackets are tied to this line. So there's one there, there's a bracket on that guy, and there's a bracket tucked around the corner there. So when we put them back together, we want to make sure that those brackets are also around the bolt before we remount the upper cover. So just for reference, pretty much the top and the side bolts are all the same size. They're the shorter size. And then if you compare these two, the longer one is the one that goes to the bottom middle, and then the second longest one goes to like the center of the timing cover. Just for reference if someone took them off without making this little diagram. So with the bolts off, you should be able to take the timing cover off. I think first you might have to reposition this line up and over just to get it out of the way. And then you should be able to take it off. There you go. And then twist it back and then up. So now we got that off. Okay, so with the timing cover off, now we got to make sure that we have it at TDC. So on the 3 pulleys, there's 3 separate marks. I didn't take the fan off to do this, so in order to get at the bolt, just rearrange. I used a ratchet with an extension, a socket, to get at that bolt. That bolt was 19 millimeter. So I kept rotating it until I don't know if you can see that, but if you look down there, maybe I'll put an arrow in the video. But there's a line just about there, and that has to line up with there's a little gauge next to it with some lines on it. So I lined those two up on that pulley, and then on this pulley lined up, sorry, it's gonna, see how I can get access to that view. I lined up that with that notch, and then on this pulley I lined up that with that notch. So all the pulleys are lined up. Now I'm going to zip tie the belt to the pulley to make sure that it doesn't move while we're working on this. One really important note that I want to make sure everyone's aware of is that you should only turn the engine clockwise, so like you're tightening the bolt. If you turn it the opposite way, like you're loosening it, you're going to mess with the tensioning of your timing belt, and it could mess with other things. So just be sure when you're messing with this thing to only turn the crankshaft in a clockwise direction, or in other words, like you're tightening the bolt. Here's another view of the timing mark on the main crank pulley. So you can kind of see a T right there, and that lines up on the line on the pulley. It's really hard to see, and I had to kind of brush some oil and debris off of it so I can actually tell what's going on there, but I just wanted to give one better view of what I was trying to look at when turning the crankshaft over. So I put 3 zip ties, put one over there. This one you can get pretty close around the pulley, so I put one zip tie there. The injection pump pulley has kind of a ridge to it, which makes me a little nervous since I can't get it super snug to the actual belt itself, so I put 2 zip ties on this one. And this is just to hold it still while we work to take off the injection pump. So with that part done, I think we can now move on to the fuel rails, disconnecting the fuel rails. So we'll move over to that area. And before I start taking all this stuff off, I wanted to kind of get a video of everything surrounding this, how things are routed, so when we come back we can get the wires and all the lines routed and put back exactly where they go. So I'm just taking a quick kind of overall video of the system here. Alright. Okay, so we're at the fuel rails here. All you'll be doing is taking a 17 millimeter. I already loosened this a little bit, but loosen that and just go down the line. You don't want to get anything into these ports, so I'm gonna block them with some cut fingers from a glove just to make sure nothing falls in there once they're all taken off. So I'm gonna go and loosen these ones up and move on to removing the fuel lines on the actual pump. So let's see what happens. So before I actually get to those fuel lines, I think I'm going to take off the throttle cable. There's 2 cables that go to this injection pump, at least on my van. There's the one that goes through this red material, and then there's one underneath it. I don't know if you can see that. That goes, so I think the throttle. I'm not sure what the top one does, but you'll have to disconnect that back nut right there, and then it looks like there's a pin that I can take off, which would get rid of that cable. I'm trying to make it so I can put it back where it's currently set. And then for the lower one, there's a nut right there, and then it'll pop up to the top, and then I just have to disconnect this piece from here too. So I'll work on getting those disconnected. All right, with those two throttle cables disconnected, I just kind of try to tuck them up and away so they're not in the way of anything. So I have both cables kind of tucked up here. The next thing I'd like to get to, I'm just trying to get this as bare bones before I start hitting the actual fuel inlet and outlet lines coming from the pump. So I think the next one is electrical connectors. So it looks like on this van there's a connector here. Then there's these two connections up top. And I think that is it. So I'll disconnect those and then see what else we need to take off here. So this top connector right here wasn't in any of the reference videos that I had. This ends up connecting to the block into another place on the injection pump that needs to be disconnected, but you need to get this off this metal tab. And I was pulling on it pretty hard and didn't know how to get it off, but in order to get it off, you can kind of see it, an example on this one. So inside there, there's a tab. This one broke off from here a long time ago, so I didn't have to do that one. But using this one as a reference, you can take your flathead and stick it in there and undo the pin, and the pin kind of falls into this hole right here. So once you put your flathead in there and lift up, you can get this electrical connector off. So this one's off. It also connects, I don't know if you can see that. Give me a second here. Right there. So I gotta disconnect it right there, and then I think that cable will be good. So let me disconnect those and then we'll get back to it. So I got a little bit of a better angle. That yellow plastic piece to the left, right there, is one of the connections, and the other connection is centered on in this video right here, with the cable coming from the right and then left coming up. So I disconnect right there too. Okay, so with the electrical connections done, the next piece to do are the fuel lines and vacuum lines. So there's a line here that needs to be disconnected. There's two lines in the back that need to be disconnected with the hose clamps. One there, and then one there. And then there's this line right here. And I think that's all the connections on the pump. And then we could start working on getting the hardware off. So all the fuel lines to the injection pump have been removed. The clamps that were used on mine were this style. I didn't have to use the Phillips part of it. I just used a 7mm socket. Was able to get those loose. They have to really be loose for you to get over them, because all the connections are barbed connections. So make sure if they're not coming off, you probably have to loosen that hose clamp a little bit more. So next, what we're going to do is loosen the injection pump pulley nut. So I'm gonna go and do that. Then there's two bolts, I think, right here, and then some bolts underneath that need to be undone. I'm following a video on YouTube of someone who has a similar Delica. I'll have the link on there because his video is pretty good too. But let's try to do that and see what happens. Before I take that pulley nut off, I just want to get a video of the deflection in the belt, so that when I put it back together I can make sure it's the same. Alright, so to get the injection pump pulley nut off, I tried to, in the reference video, just put something on there and hammer it, but every time I did it, I started rotating it backwards, and I know everyone on the threads say not to do that, so I had a buddy hold this nut on while I loosened this nut with a hammer, and then I was able to break it loose, and it didn't move it that much off of TDC, so I just moved it back to TDC afterwards. So now that we got that nut off, then we'll start taking the 2 bolts that are holding it to the back of this timing cover area. Okay, so one of the bolts is right there, back there. It's super hard to get to. So how we were able to get through it is a long extension and a joint and a short socket. So you can get onto it and then loosen it that way for this side. So now we'll go over to the other side. All right, so it took us like a good half hour to get at the bolt that's down under here. It's underneath the coolant hose. You might be easier if you took the coolant hose off, but what we ended up doing was used a really long extension, and we fed it underneath all the fuel rails and everything up to here, and then use the ratchet way back here. That's the only way we could think of getting that bolt. I don't know if there's a better spot to do that from. I think the reference video said they did it from underneath, but it's almost impossible to see that bolt from underneath where you could also access the ratchet. So it's just a lot of extensions and patience to get at that bolt on the other side. Hopefully it's easier to put back on. All right, so after you get the 2 side bolts that are by the timing cover, then you got to go underneath the van and take out the 2 bolts from underneath. You'll see 6 sets of bolts right here. You want to take the ones that are out right now. Otherwise, you take the other 2 out, you might affect the timing. Okay, so after I removed those bolts, we hit the shaft with a hammer and loosened it up, and then we were able to pull back the injection pump. One thing though, you won't be able to get it out, at least on my van. There's the mounts back here for these dipstick holders. I had to take that off so I could push these to the side. The other thing that I got stuck on is taking the injection pump out. It was getting held up, I think at I'll show you. It was getting hung up around this area, and I'm not sure why, but we hit this, put the nut back on, so it's enough to protect the threads, and then hit this, and finally it dislodged from this area. And then it was pretty easy to pull out, but you do have to take off the that bolt to move those dipstick holders off to the side so you can pull it back out. So now that this is out, we're going to look at replacing this seal here. So I got this kit here. Has all the parts in it, but I'm not going to be using all these. I'm only going to use the ones that I need. So yeah, move on to that. So with the unit out of the van, I'm going to take a little bit of time and clean all the oil and diesel fuel off the injection pump. I'll use, I'm not going to spray directly onto the pump because I don't want to ruin any seals, but I'm going to use some parts cleaner. I'm going to spray it on a rag and then use the rag to wipe down, wipe all the areas off. That way when I do reinstall it, it'll be easier to identify if it is leaking and where it's leaking, because the unit will be clean versus right now it's pretty dirty. Just here are the part numbers for what's on my van. So we got the MD number here, and then here's the Bosch number here. And then I'm going to take a quick video around the unit. Just in case something happens, I have something to go back and reference. That's the side. I did also find this O-ring underneath it. I think this was from maybe a previous job that I wasn't a part of, but I went on the Delica forums, and there's pretty much nothing this could go to unless you took apart the pump, which I haven't taken apart the pump yet. So I think this was a leftover from something else, but if I find out something different, I'll let everyone know. Great, so I'll clean this up, and then I'm kind of going back and forth right now. Right now, I only have, the only thing that's really wrong is, it's not on this side, but the opposite side, this cover right here is leaking. So part of me just wants to replace that and put it back in the van. The van was running really good before, so don't really want to complicate a situation any more than it is. But it took a lot of effort to get this out of the van. So to just replace one seal and put it back, if it were to leak from a different spot, it'd kind of feel like a waste of time. So I called the local diesel shop that specializes in rebuilding injection pumps. They're a little wary because it's Mitsubishi and from Japan, but I gave him the Bosch number that I showed down there, and he said he was going to look it up to see if they can get the parts and if they have the experience to rebuild them. So I'll figure out if I want to just replace the single seal or do a full rebuild based on what they come back with on the quote. So more to come on that. I ended up going to the diesel shop. They said they would replace the seal. The reason I ended up going with them and not just doing it myself was they were going to replace the seal and then throw it on a bench. And then they were going to run it to check to see if there was any other leaks. That kind of takes away my worry about putting it back in the van and then it's leaking anyways. So they ended up replacing both, they call it the advanced O-rings, but it's like the timing cover O-rings. So this side and on the other side right there. After they replaced those O-rings, they put it on the bench to test it, and it was also leaking from the head O-ring is what they call it. So they ended up replacing this, and the other side. He was saying that maybe it was leaking down and then kind of coming through here, and that's why it was looking like it was leaking from over here. I don't know if that was the case, but I'm happy that I definitely think it's worth going to them to run it on a bench just to make sure. It's a lot of work to take it in or take it out. Now I just got the kind of insurance that when I put it back in, it's not going to leak everywhere. I did mention, since I zip tied the belt to the IP, pulley or sprocket or however you want to call it, I marked where the wood key or the key is on the shaft here, and let them know, like, hey, when I took it out, this is where it was, if you could put it back to where it was. He says that their test benches would automatically put it at TDC, but if it wasn't at TDC, they would line it up. So he just put it back to where it was. So now ideally when I go put it back in the van, it's going to line up with the pulley, since the pulley is zip tied to the belt and I don't have to mess with any timing. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, the notes that they have on the sheet here coming back from them was leaks from advance, fix only that. They do not want to rebuild this because there's no parts available. So they just did the advanced O-rings, the timing cover O-rings, and then the head O-ring, and then they ran pump and confirmed there's no leaks. So it's kind of a pricey thing to do to not have a full rebuild, but I think it would have cost a lot more in time if I put this back in the van and it ended up leaking after replacing the O-rings that I guess weren't leaking to begin with. But so now let's get this in the van and start bringing that back to, putting things back together and bleeding the system. So I very slowly got the injection pump in. It's not tightened down at all yet. Some key things to watch out for is I went back to my pictures to make sure the cables were still routed similarly to how it was routed before. I know this needs to connect up here through this thing, so I think that's good. While putting it in, I kind of had to watch the fuel lines, make sure they weren't grabbing on anything. I know it kept getting caught on this back wire here. This line right here was getting caught here, so I didn't notice it right away, but just don't want to bend anything. So now the hard part is to get the bolts that mount the injection pump to the back of the timing cover. So that bolt right there, and I'll get a video from underneath. That one I was able to get the washer and the lock nut on from right here, just really slowly. The one back there, I think I might have to go from underneath to put the washer on, and the lock washer and the nut. So I'm gonna try to do that and get a video of that, and then try to tighten them up. That one's the hardest side to get to. I haven't found quite an easy way to do that yet, so I'll get underneath the van and get that other washer, lock nut, and lock washer and nut on. Okay, let me get this focused here. So you can see the one, I'm underneath the van right now. You can see the one nut up on top. That's the one we have to get a washer and a lock nut on, and the one on the bottom, that's one you can access from the top. Unfortunately, sorry, this is such a bad angle. It looks like you should be able to reach your hand from here to get at that bolt, but you can get your hand to it and you can touch it, but you're not going to be able to like hold a nut, a bolt, or a nut, a lock washer, and a washer to get at that bolt that's up there, and you can't access it from the top. So I think I might try to use some fishing line to let the stuff hover there, and then I won't have to carry the stuff up from the bottom, because once you have it in your hand's too big to fit up there, and hopefully I can get it started that way. So we'll try that out and see what happens. This is going to be way hard to do with the camera, so I'm just going to kind of show what I'm thinking about, and then I'm going to do it off camera and let you know if it works. But here's some fishing line with the washer, the lock washer, and the nut, and I'm literally just gonna fish it down here and maybe tie it off on this hose just at the depth of the bolt, and then go from underneath to see if I can force it onto the bolt, because I can touch it, I just won't be able to carry anything to that spot. So I'm gonna do that and see if it works. Let's get this focused again. I don't know if I can get a good video here. You can kind of see the washer sitting right there on the edge. Alright, so I have the fishing line tied around the coolant hose, and you can kind of see the washer and the lock washer and the nut are kind of just resting on that bolt. They're not really fastened, but that's with fishing line just hanging it there. And then just for reference, you can still see the bottom one has already been started from the top. So now with it kind of in space, I'm going to try to reach through this hole that we're looking through here, and try to tighten that up. If there is an easier way to do this, whoever is the genius that knows how to get at this, simply please post it in the comments, because this is the worst part so far of the entire job, is just getting at this one bolt. So I don't know if this is the best way, but this is the way I'm going to try. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get a really good video of what's going on here, but I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can. So I used the fishing line. I had two, I didn't tie it to the washer and the nut. I just had a big loop. So like it went down and then back up, and then I wrapped both strands around this. Then I went underneath the van. The bolts down there, so I can't get a good angle. I tried multiple times. I got it started with my fingers, and then if you look kind of back here, right there, there's a long extension that I have with a 12mm socket at the end. And even with the fishing line on, I just tightened it enough where I knew the nut was started. And now I ripped the fishing line off. So I ripped off the washer side. That side's the easiest. The nut side is still attached. I'm going to keep tightening it and hoping this comes off too. So that's kind of how I got that started. It was definitely not easy, so I'll keep going and hopefully get this done the rest of the way. So I didn't really get a good video of this when we were taking it out because it was giving us so much problems, but I just want to get a video of me when I'm putting it back in. You can see the ratchet back there, and then I have extensions that go underneath the fuel rails, and then I don't know, it focuses. I have a pivot at the very end, connected to the bolt down there. Yeah, so the only way to do this though is you only use half the extensions to get to it. Get that swivel hooked up to the nut, and then come back through with another extension in your ratchet. So that's how I'm getting under there. Like I said, dude, if someone has a better idea of doing this, please say something in the comments. All right, I don't know if this is the appropriate way. I highly doubt this is the right way of doing this. So once again, if there's a better way, just let me know in the comments. But to tighten the nut on the pulley, I have a breaker bar on that pulley, and I'm holding that while tightening this. I also throw in a little bit of an extension on that so that's easier to hold that while I'm trying to tighten this side. And I was able to get that torqued up. What the torque specs are, I'm not 100%. I went to 85 foot-pounds. I'm not sure if that's 100% right. That's what I found online. So, but I was able to tighten that, and then I double checked let's see if we can get that. Timing marks, that one's good. Let me get this out of the way. That one's good. And then the hardest one to see. Where's my flashlight? Where is that? It is... sorry, just give me a second. Oh, it's right there. You can see the mark is right on the T. That one's the hardest one to see with the video, so I apologize if it doesn't look right. So, with those connected, that pulley's on. I'm gonna just re-verify that these nuts are tight after tightening the pulley and make sure I didn't, suck the injection pump back a little bit and now there's some more play in there. So I'll double check to make sure those are tight, and then I'll start making all the connections on the pump. I might leave a couple hoses unlocked because the bleeding sequence, you need to go through and undo some things to get the system bled. So I'm gonna double check these and then go back to reconnecting the lines on top of the injection pump. Now, one thing I almost forgot is you see those two holes, one there and one there, up there past that grounding cable or whatever that cable is. Those are the two mounts to the injection pump from below. Don't forget to mount it here too. So I'm actually not going to start plugging things in yet. I'm going to get this mounted. I think the way we did this before is we just had a lot of extensions to get up there, and then a breaker bar to get it loose. So to tighten it, I probably won't use a breaker bar, but don't forget these connections at the bottom here. So I could leave this part out because it was an absolute pain in the ass. It's more of a fuck up on my part, but I tightened these two bolts before tightening the bolts on the bottom. And after I tightened these and went underneath, the bolt wouldn't line up with the hole at all. I even loosened up the two mounts that are going to the block, obviously leaving the ones that do the timing, and I still couldn't shift the bracket around enough to get it to mount. So I had to come back and loosen this one and loosen this one, remount from underneath, I left the bolts to the block loose, came up here, tightened these down, and now I'm going to go back down there and tighten to the block. So just a heads up on that. It's already a pain in the ass to get at these top two ones. So make sure you tighten everything, or at least snug up the bottom before you tighten this one all the way down. All right, so I have it physically mounted, and I've already gone through and started connecting some things. There's definitely an order to this. Obviously try to get the things that are deeper in the engine connected. So I know that there's 2 cable connections back there, so I need to put those in before making this connection, and then making this connection. There's also a connection to a rear banjo bolt back here that needs to get made before you put this electrical connector on. This line is easier to get in first before you start doing your throttle cables. Basically it seemed like all your fuel connections you want to do first, and then you can move to the electrical lines. So I got everything but the main fuel lines. You can see the caps are still on there. Those aren't connected yet. And then one of the rear banjo bolts is disconnected. The process for bleeding the injection pump is to press the pump on top of the fuel filter until fuel comes out of, you probably can't see it, the banjo bolt right there. So I'm going to start pumping that pump and hopefully get some fuel coming out of here. So you can see some of the diesel bleeding out of there, and that's the pump. The pump was pretty stiff, so I was getting worried that it wasn't going to do anything, but after like 50, 60 pumps, something came out here. So that blue tape is on that hose there. I'm going to connect that to the injection pump, and then start buttoning up the rest of this area. The procedure for cranking the fuel lines, or bleeding the fuel lines, is to leave them undone and turn over the engine. Have some rags there just to catch it, and then they're blood. So I'll be doing that after I get the cover back on, the throttle cables back on, and then the shroud back on. So I'm gonna pretty much get all this back to exactly how it should be before I try doing the fuel lines to the those fuel lines back there. So I was about to put on the cover, but one of the things I read in the threads is if you do any work around the timing belts, to manually turn it over once or twice just to make sure nothing's catching, nothing got messed up. So I'm gonna go down there and turn it, and then make sure nothing catches, and then I'll put the cover back on in the shroud. So just that article that talks about that will be linked in the description. Okay, so with the fan shroud all in place, I tightened all the 17mm connections to the injectors, but not tightened them all the way. The next step is to crank the engine, but not for too long because you could burn up your starter motor, but just long enough to see fuel squirt out. I already did a little bit, so you can kind of see there's fuel coming out of that one and that one, but I just want to show the process. So I'm just kind of sitting here watching the injectors. You can put like a towel or something over it, but it makes it kind of hard to see if fuel's coming out. And then I'll go like this. Oh, see, saw it squirt. So I think that's good. So now I'm going to tighten these 17mm connections, and then try to start the engine. So it took a couple cranks for it to actually start up even after bleeding the injector lines, but it's running now. I have some old like cardboard that I got when I bought some rims, so I put that underneath the spot where it would be leaking, and I'm just gonna let it warm up, and then keep checking that cardboard to see if I see any drip spots. I'm also looking around the injectors, around all the connections to the fuel pump with a flashlight to make sure I'm having no leak. I'll probably just take it for a ride, make sure I'm not leaking anywhere as well. So I took it for a ride around the area here and opened up the doghouse and checked the injectors, checked all the inlets and outlets, and I don't see any leaks. So I think this is a job that's done, and we'll see what happens next. In terms of hardness, this was, at least for me, pretty hard to get the injector pump out. That was the absolute nightmare, is getting those two top bolts that mount to the back of the timing cover off. It took me almost 2 days. I know there's some YouTube videos of people doing this pretty quickly, but I'm not, I guess, the best mechanic. So yeah, hopefully this helps you guys, and I'll catch you guys next time.